Michigan State University's Office of K-12 Outreach, bringing research, innovation, and best practices to educators across Michigan, the United States, and the world.
I'm Shirley Jackson, an outreach specialist in the Office of K-12 Outreach in the College of Education at Michigan State University. March is International Women's History Month and therefore presents a unique opportunity for us to celebrate the contributions of women and what they've done across Michigan, especially, and around the world. So over the next few months, our office will engage in conversation with incredible women who've chosen careers in education. We'll explore the many ways these professionals continue to influence our thinking about topics related to the way we educate learners in our state, from the very youngest to young people who attend our colleges and universities. With me to kick off our series is Dr. Rema Vassar, a well-known and respected educator whose many years of service to underserved communities have positioned her to continue her advocacy and to take on new challenges. Dr. Rema, what a pleasure.
Hi. Hey, Aurora. How are you?
I am fine. Welcome, and thank you for agreeing to join me.
No, thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for agreeing to do this interview with me. I'm stoked that you are interviewing me, a pioneer in education, someone I've always looked up to in terms of who to be in all schools to all children. Just your kindness and your empathy for families just is a model. So exemplary. So I appreciate that it's you who's interviewing me from the K-12 Outreach office. And thank you to Dr. Beverly for having this kind of insight and vision to focus on women in education. I appreciate his work in so many ways.
And so do I. And I also appreciate your comments and how kind you are to say those wonderful things. Thank you.
I do work on being kind. I do. I work on being kind, but that wasn't kindness. It's just facts. I'm a little nervous because you're a rock star, but I'm gonna try my best to make sure that you are proud of me at the end of this interview.
Well, no need for you to be nervous. You've got all these accomplishments under your belt, and we're gonna just plunge on. Sadly, though, we only have a little bit of time. I could talk to you for hours because I know that you've got your fingers in so many baskets. And so we're going to try to just explore a little bit and maybe start by asking you to tell us a bit about your journey, both career-wise and educationally. How did it begin? How did you end up here?
That's a good question. So one of the things I haven't done is mapped out my life, right? I kind of just go where the opportunity comes, but I always knew I was going to be in education. From the time that I was 5, I saw The Wiz and I thought, oh my God, I want to be Diana Ross so bad. She was so beautiful and her voice was so lovely. And I thought I could do that. I could be her, but really Diana Ross is a singer. I'm not. That's number one. My talents don't extend to vocal strength. And then also, probably at 5 years old, Diana Ross and I weigh the same. She's little. I'm not. And so I thought I can't be her. And I really thought about who I want to be. And I like to teach. I've been a teacher, I think, since I got on the planet. And so I've always thought I would be a teacher. And that's exactly what I did. I taught English at a small town called Covert, Michigan. I don't know if you know Covert. It's on the west side of the state. I grew up on the west side of the state. It's right near Kalamazoo. Small Black community back then, and probably a mile long, right? Like one gas station kind of town.
Wow.
But the community was the school was the community. And that was just the most nurturing, beautiful space I've ever been in, honestly. And then I left there and went to California, and taught English, AP honors, and what they call college prep at that time. But that's a whole different, another conversation for another day. And then became a counselor and a principal. And I ended my K-12 career in 2014 as a school counselor in Pasadena when I had to move back to Michigan. And so within that, though, I ended up going to UCLA and getting a PhD, and also starting a career in higher education. So in 2005 on to 2014, I was in both spaces, in higher ed and in K-12 spaces. And that was a rich time because I was able to talk to educators about what was happening in my day, right? Like I would come to class and give them real life scenarios and case studies. And it kept me sharp to be a practitioner. And I really love kids. Like children just keep you young and keep you on your toes. And secondary children especially, you have to be sharp so and quick. And so I do miss them desperately. And I have not worked formally in K-12 spaces since 2014. But I do get to dip in Detroit and work with a student group on advocacy and activism. And so that's actually a lot of fun. Yeah.
That's exciting. I want you to tell us a little bit about the student group.
Oh, so they're bomb. We at Eastern Michigan, I teach masters and PhD students who are going to be leaders in schools. And I also have a partnership with DPSCD to develop their leaders. And all of that work is through a leadership for equity lens, right? We're trying to think about ways to transform schools, dismantle systems of oppression, and actually change schools, lead change. And one of the principals in DPSCD said, you know what, I actually need to do this work alongside students. I can't really make these choices by myself. I can't see everything. I don't know everything. I want them to inform my work. And so myself and Dr. B, a former student at Eastern, who's now a full-time lecturer at Eastern, we took a group of her students and worked with them for over 2 years, identifying systemic racism, anti-Black racism that was influencing their schooling experiences. They've done everything. They've dismantled policy. They've changed PD. They've met with the superintendent with a standing meeting to talk about issues that they're confronting. Especially when COVID-19 hit, they really just had a lot of concerns about what was happening and not happening in their schools. So they've had a voice where they've presented nationally. They've presented in the state of Michigan. They just presented to a group at University of Michigan. So they've gotten around talking about the transformative work they're doing alongside their principal at CMA, Communication Media Arts. And Danya Odom is the principal there. And she could tell you that it's not easy when students actually know and can name their oppression and then call you to the carpet and make you accountable to change. Change comes quickly, but also sometimes painfully. So, I mean, I think kids get this way easier and quicker than we do. We have a lot of unlearning to do that they don't have.
You're right. And I'm thinking back to my own high school days, and it's very difficult for me to even imagine confronting adults about my own mistreatment, And now we have kids who don't shy away from that at all. And it sounds as if these young people are going to be adults to be reckoned with,
Oh, so I always say that if you want to change the world, you change schools, right? Because everyone has to go through these schools. It doesn't matter, it could be charter, private, homeschool. Everyone has to be schooled some kind of way in the United States. And so if we're thinking about transformative change, what we need to do is change the space that everyone goes through. And because whatever we do produces society, whatever choices we make pedagogically, instructionally, discipline, all these things have lifelong implications for the individuals going through that system, but then for the whole society. And so if we want to see a different world, a better world, then we need to change what we decide to do in these spaces. And these kids, I don't know what kind of adults they're going to be, because I've never seen adults behave this way. In the middle of a meeting, they'll say, I have a question. There's one woman, a little young girl named Jalea Word, but she's like almost a full woman. She's so little and so cute and innocent. Do not be fooled. When she says, I have a question, you should just apologize. Because whatever she's done, I've learned. I'm sorry. Whatever I did, I apologize. I'm just gonna take this little whooping that you're about to give, because the question is going to be an indictment and you're going to have to answer to it. And she asks it very diplomatically and nicely, and then turns off her microphone, right, and waits for you to sweat it out, because they hold adults accountable. They hold themselves accountable in ways that I've never seen ever in K-12 spaces.
You're describing a level of consciousness that you don't see, I know I didn't see it growing up. I didn't have it. Neither did my friends. And when someone had it, we really looked at them as being, the word my mother used to always use was impudent, as opposed to people who were defending their right to occupy some space,
Oh, no. And that's the thing. They're not just conscious, they're courageous. Right,
and
they're courageous. Right. Yes, they know and understand, but also, and they say it, and in the face of their parents saying, "You can't talk to adults like this," right? Like, and all they're really doing is saying, "Yeah, we're a whole people, and this school is actually for us, and so you should be listening to what we are saying. We need. We're articulating what we need from you all, and so you need to respond if this school is really for us."
Well, you're identifying young people who don't have a problem pointing out challenges to their ability to get what they think we owe them as members of our society. I'm wondering, though, as you came along, because you came of age during a different time as I did, even longer ago than you did, I wonder, what do you identify as some challenges you faced on the road to becoming Dr. Rema? Because it can't have been easy.
No. So that's so interesting. That's an interesting question, in that I don't know that I've seen them as challenges more than opportunities to engage in brave acts, right? And so my mother, who actually is the one who drilled education as the pathway to all things successful, right? I mean, she was kind of a maniac in this, like just hardcore on education.
So it sounds like she was really a mentor for you as well as your mom. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't even know that. Sometimes I wouldn't see her as a mom. I would just see her as a mentor. Like, she was on us. And even as an adult, I don't think she would call me anything but Dr. Rema. And she would introduce me to people that she had been in relationship with. And they would, "Oh, you're the one with the PhD at UCLA," like that. She kind of led with that. She was super, super proud. And at the same time, she let me know, as a Black woman, I would have all kinds of different obstacles that came, but she saw them as obstacles and not as barriers, right? Like, this is something you have to get around, get over, get under, but not something that would ever stop me. And so I never saw it as like, this is really gonna derail me. I always thought, okay, well, what's the move, right? Where I don't ever take a no. I think, okay, so what's the workaround? I do that all day, every day. And so from kindergarten on, I grew up in a small town, and someone called me rural one day, and I thought, I'm cosmopolitan. I'm out here. I'm international, baby. I've been to 29 different countries. Who you calling rural? But I also did the tassel corn in the summer. So probably rural. And it was my brother and I were the two Black children in school very, very often.
Wow.
And so
Interesting.
from kindergarten, so I knew what Blackness looked like from the time that I was in kindergarten. The first day I learned very quickly what Blackness meant.
Because your
I got sent home from
classmates
school.
helped you understand that, I'm sure.
And I helped them to understand that there are certain things I'm not going to tolerate. The first day.
Wow, at age 5.
I got sent home from school the first day of school. I had to make an example.
I want to go back for a minute, though, because what you're describing is so quintessentially you, the way I see you, not letting things get in the way of your reaching whatever it is that you're trying to find. A lot of times we really see the word obstacle and the word barrier as synonymous. And you've given me a way of looking at it that's very, very different. An obstacle may be a temporary problem that you have to try to solve so that you can continue to move forward, while a barrier is something that may be more permanent. And so it sounds as if you've really identified a different way of talking to children about what might get in their way. I wish you could somehow have the ability to just wrap your arms around all of the scores of children I think of who have been stopped and not able to move forward because of obstacles. And
I think that's why the work with the adults is so important, because I need other adults to do that work, right? Because I can't get my arms around all these children. I need other arms. And so in my work across the state with the Michigan Department of Education, with St. Joe ISD, with Muskegon Heights, with Van Buren ISD, across the state with DPSTD, I'm trying to get the adults to see that the ways that we've been doing school are not beneficial to anyone in society, actually. Yeah. It's not just for the minoritized. If you think about Michigan, we all need some triage, right? Regardless of, because of race and because of class and because of these differences that we're not addressing adequately. So my work really is, the treat is the students, right? But my most intense work is with the adults who educate them.
Wow. And, I wonder, because you have all of these wants for our children, I wonder if you have some personal aspirations beyond where you are. And I need to back up for just a minute, because that makes me think about something really impressive that you did. And so I'm going to come back to your own aspirations, because I really don't think I can go much further. I know time is winding down, and I want to make sure that I talk about this impressive achievement of yours, becoming a trustee at Michigan State University. Wow. Tell us a little bit about that, how that happened and how you managed to pull that off. That's a statewide election.
Oh, I don't know. So I think we started off saying, I haven't figured out what I want to be when I grow up. And so I haven't really had a plan. I just kind of go where the opportunities present themselves, and I try to be as prepared as possible to meet the current call, right? Whatever that call is. And somehow someone thought, oh, Rema, you should probably run for a school board. I mean, you have passion around education. I think you will be really good for that. Okay. I had no clue. I've never run for anything. I was the NAACP secretary in undergrad, and I got that uncontested. I didn't have to run. I've never run for anything. And so to run a statewide race, get fundraising and meet and greets and all of these things was more than I ever thought. Like I guess I didn't even know what I was getting into. But once I was in it, I said, okay, I'm in it to win it. And, I got 2.4 million people to vote for me. I'm not even sure how that happened, but then this role has been so enlightening. I've learned so much, right? And one of the things I've learned is that we need more educators on these school boards because, like me, and I think you have to invite minoritized folks to run for these things. I wouldn't have not considered that. I wouldn't even have thought about it. Someone had to invite me to do that.
So you see some benefit in having people who are more like you, people who are on the front lines of this work, serve on some of these boards rather than the traditional business stakeholders and other professions who are represented.
Well, there's power in policy. And I bring to this board a K-12 lens and a higher ed lens that no one else on the board has, right? So I'm thinking not just about what we do at Michigan State for our students, and particularly our vulnerable students, but also I'm thinking about our outreach to underserved students. Like, how are we reaching people in the UP and how the indigenous folks, how are we reaching back to my school, right, in Sturgis, where there were a lot of low income folks, right, who don't look like me, but certainly don't have access to MSU in ways that other folks have. And so thinking about outreach and thinking about what we do in order for them to, like, I've heard my influence. I've heard it in people's language. I've heard the influence. They'll say things like, what are we doing to make sure that students graduate, as opposed to we need to make sure that students graduate. No, the onus is on us, right? They're coming to us for this education. What do they get when they're here in terms of supports? And what do they get in terms of community and belongingness? What are we doing for them? Not necessarily how do they get through and how do they persist? No, how do we make sure that they do persist? And what are we doing for our matriculation for the folks who don't feel like they belong? So even in the way that I frame my questions, the answers have to be different, right? And so
it sounds
I'm
like you're
noticing
saying, yeah, it sounds as if you're thinking that the end product can't just be a degree or a diploma, a certificate, but it has to be an individual who now looks at society as a place where they have some responsibilities as well, and where they're thinking agency and responsibility.
Mm-hmm, both. Because you can have the responsibility and not feel empowered to do anything, right? And I think Spartans are the salt of the earth. They're hardworking folks. And so if we can get Spartans to change the world, oh my goodness, right? So that's the end game. Do I want them to graduate? Yes. Because if we think about Black women particularly, we're the most educated subgroup in the United States. Mm-hmm. Black women. We have more degrees than anyone else. Okay, so what has that gotten us? We have these degrees, and we also have the greatest debt to income ratio of everyone else. We're the lowest paid of anyone else. We have the most debt than anyone else. And so, yes, I do want us to graduate, because if we think about who doesn't graduate at MSU, it is people who look like us. But even once they graduate, what kind of world are we sending them out to in that the equity in access is still not there? right? So we're the last promoted. Things like this. I think not only should we be concentrating on degrees, because we should. I mean, some of our graduation rates for minoritized students are deplorable. We're at D minuses. So yes, that. And when they leave, are they leaving as change makers, as change agents, as transformative leaders who are thinking now about ways that they influence the industry that they're going into, so that it's more open and accessible to everyone?
Well, if they have you as a teacher, I'm sure that they will be well on their way to making some inroads into those things. I wonder, though, as you look at women in general, you've talked about some of the challenges that Black women face, and I couldn't agree more. I wonder about challenges for women as a group, even if you're not looking at race. What do you see as perhaps the largest challenge women in general face?
So, when I think about who has influenced me throughout my life, certainly men have played it, particularly since I'm a reader, right? There's so many authors who are generally men in the canon who have influenced my thought and continue to influence what I think and how I feel about all kinds of subjects. But the people who have propped me up, who have scratched my head when I was ailing, right? Who encouraged me, who smile from across the street and bring over a cake, right? These are all women. And so I think that our biggest challenge is overcoming some of these artificial barriers that we put in terms of womanhood, and having a more collective idea of what that looks like. If women were to come together across all spaces, industries, all contexts, if we were to come together, who could stop us? We're the majority. We actually, during the COVID-19 pandemic, we emerged as the most effective leaders across all industries. Women did. I'm not sure if that's the empathy that we have been socialized to give. I'm not sure all the reasons why that was named, but I'm not sure all the reasons why we were more effective leaders than our counterparts, but we were. And so if we think about harnessing the power of women across race, across class, across all these other, fallacious indicators that we have, I think we could change the world, particularly white women. And I talk about women, and when I talk to them, MDE, I do an African American Student Initiative work for the Department of Education, and the educators come from all over, and mostly are white women, because 86%, sometimes 84% of all classroom teachers are white middle class women. So if we're thinking again that schools are the place for change, for social change, then it's really white women in lockstep with women across education saying we need to change the space of most potency, which is the classroom. And if we had like-mindedness, communal goals, agreed upon aims, I don't know that how could they stop us from changing schools? It couldn't happen. It really rests on education.
I have to agree with you, given that we have so many women teachers. But how do we make that happen? That's a huge task, and women are not a monolith. So it sounds as if we've got a little work to do where that's concerned.
Women aren't a monolith. However, we do share a common bond in oppression. So regardless of, again, all these other demographic factors, women are still second-class citizens in the United States. And so we share that even in our diversity, we share that one marker. And so if we just coalesce on that, and again, I think the only way we do that is through schools. What are we teaching? How are we teaching it? To whom are we teaching? That I would go through American Lit and have one woman who looked like me as an author and two women total to read is insane, right? Like what you're teaching already, that we're inferior, that, you know, we're not a part of the American fabric and the international fabric. I don't know that you can have a conversation about any topic without talking about women. We've been here before everybody, literally before everybody.
It sounds as if you're saying then that by not being intentional about what we need to do as women, we're continuing that trend toward getting views that are more male focused and that keep the status quo the status quo.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Well,
Absolutely.
I have all these questions that I wanted to ask you, and I knew I wasn't going to be able to get them in the short time that we've been given to conduct these interviews. But, I have a final question that I just can't let you leave without asking you that. And that's whether or not, of all the questions that I've asked you today, and probably the others I have written down and didn't get to ask you, what would you like to answer to? What question would you have wanted me to ask and allow you to answer?
Yeah, so that's interesting. I would say that I don't have the question, but I have the answer that I want to give. So, this is International Women's Month. We have a Women's Month that's coming up as well. And so these kind of pop out months to honor women. Sure, I guess that's where we are right now. But I think it's pretty audacious to give women a spotlight month. I mean, I think it's kind of terrible. And that, as we just said, without women, there would be no one to discuss, period.
That's a wonderful point you make.
Who would be here without us? And so this idea that you have to add us in and you have to think about us in isolation really means that patriarchy is still the order of the day, right? And that we're thinking about women as a specialty group is crazy. If you talk about any instance of our past and our present, women are there. We've been there from the beginning. And so to think that we have to have a month that's sequestered for us is sure a stride, but also really indicative of the fact that we have not come where we should be, where we don't have a pop-up month for anyone, right? That we're just having discussions about bomb, dope people, and women would be naturally included, right? That we would not have to be intentionally just dropped in as, nice salt on a meal, but we are the meal. So, and we have been the meal. So that would be my response.
The ubiquitous nature of femaleness kind of decries this whole notion of a special month for women. So this is the last question, because your response created another question that I'd like to ask you. If not a special month, then how do you address the absence of women in so many spaces where policies are being decided and decisions are being made?
I agree that that's a really good question. One is you have to have women in those decision-making roles, right? The one thing I've learned as a trustee is that there's a lot of power in policy, and that representation really does make a difference. That diversity of thought comes with diverse folks at the table. And so And diversity of thought always makes us stronger, always makes a better decision every single time. And so if we're not at the table, these conversations where decisions are being made on our behalf are devoid of our critical analysis, our thoughts, and a fair representation of who we need to be and how we need to be seen in our society. So I think part of it is us encouraging one another to take leadership roles, in roles that maybe we hadn't thought about taking, so that we're in prominent spaces to make actual change.
I don't think I could have said it better, so I'm not going to add another word to that. As always, your insights are phenomenal, and just the pleasure of sitting here and having a conversation with you has certainly warmed my space. And I hope we get a chance soon to do this again, maybe over a nice meal and a glass of wine.
That would be awesome. I would love that.
We'll have to make sure that happens. Thank you so much, Dr. Rema.